Hey guys, it's Yvette and I am ready to make the second mini series block, and it is the new one of the new blocks, and it's called Triangle Cabin. Now, if you are signed up to be in the sew along, which I hope you are, you would have received an email that said that if you were making the Triangle Cabin block and you were making a block that is larger than the 4 to 4.5 inch unfinished square, I'm pretty sure it's unfinished, then you would need to print out the new pattern, which they did provide in the email. Now, if you're making the 4 to 4.5 inch block, you don't need to worry about it. You're just fine. It's only if you're making a larger block, which I am. I'm making the full size block on each of them. So again, this is the block that we're going to be making today. And I am going to make sure that I have the correct pattern printed out, and then I'm going to get started with you guys over there. So I know you're still seeing all the stuff on my shelves, but this weekend I really do have to pack it. So I'll see you guys over at the cutting table and we'll get started. Okay, so here is, again, the packaging for the Triangle Cabin. And here is the pattern that I just printed out from Allison Glass so that I can make sure that I'm making the correct one. So what I'm going to do is I am going to cut out my pattern. I forgot to do that in the beginning the last time. Is that long enough? I think it will. And I am just going to cut it out with a 1/4 inch all the way around. Because our outside is still going to be, I mean, when you're connecting everything together, you're still going to use a 1/4 inch on that. At least I will, I think. Anyway, so I'm just going to cut this out to get ready. And I'm basically just putting my 1/4 inch line right on their outside line, so that I know that I have enough fabric to cover the whole seam allowance there. Okay. Should probably have my glasses on, but oh well. Okay, so now that I have my pattern ready, I'm going to take a look, and this is how I always start out, just to make sure that I'm now, listen, here's the thing. Please feel free to be very, as artistic as you want to be, any changes you want to make, anything that you want to do. I have seen so many blocks on Instagram that where people just go all out making amazeballs blocks, right? And that is wonderful. I would love to see your blocks. When I'm doing it for this sew along, I just kind of try to stick to how they're doing it in the pattern, because I do know that there are a lot of people who kind of get nervous about doing things differently, so I'm just going to follow sort of the way that they have it in the sample, and that's how I'm going to do it. So in the first block, which, let me see, where do I have that? Oh, it's right over here. All right, so here's my first block. And like I said, since I'm making the full pattern, you can see mine's, I think this finished at like 9. So this is 9 inches unfinished, if I'm not mistaken. 8 inches unfinished right there. So I used the fabrics in the Bermuda Batiks in the order that they were in the bundle. So at this point, this is where I am, right? So I'm going to be taking them as we go, just like I was all along. And that way I'm getting like this, you know, where everything kind of goes together, but it's going to be like, I'm just going to keep it in that order and we're going to see how it comes out. I mean, I'm sure it's going to look lovely. It looked lovely in the bundle. So I thought, hey, why not just go the way they're going? So the number one block, or the number one little piece in your template, here they have it as white. So I'm going to do the same thing. And then I can see that 2, 3, and 4 is the same fabric. And then 5, 6, and 7 are the same fabric, and so on. So I'm going to follow all the way around doing that. And then once you have the triangle made, which if you're going to be making the 4-inch, you would be stopping here where it's grayed out. That's how you would stop on that one. And then from here on out, you would be putting in your background, whatever that is. For me, it is the thatched. And so I'm going to make it all the way around, and then the rest going out here and on the bottom there, that's going to be thatched for me. So that's what I'm going to be starting with now. And it's basically going to be the same thing as I was doing before. Because these are like nice little strips, I'll tell you, I've been using, what size is this? 1 inch? I've been using roughly 1 inch strips, and I know it's a lot smaller than 1 inch, but honestly, it just makes it easier. And a 1 inch strip is like that's not that big a deal, guys. So you can cut your strips in like 1 inch pieces and then just cut off whatever you need. And like I said, like let's say we're doing this number 5 right here. Then I would, maybe if you're going to use a ruler, you can go from here to here. And because these are small pieces, and let's not just, you know, let's not go crazy. You're not going to be using a whole bunch of fabric. So give yourself at least, you know, at least a 1/4 inch on either side. I personally have been going about a 1/2 inch on either side, just because, why not? I mean, honestly, people worry so much about wasting fabric, and I'm not saying that that's a bad thing, but it's really not that much, guys. I'm telling you, when you go to trim it off, it's really not that much. And then that way, you're not in any way, shape, or form going to have too short of a piece of fabric. You know it's going to cover your line here on number 5, and you can rest easy knowing that it's going to fit exactly like it's supposed to fit. So the worst thing ever is when you keep cutting a piece of fabric that's just too small. It's just too small. It doesn't get, either it doesn't cover or it doesn't have enough seam allowance, and then you end up having to rip it out and do it again. It's just, you know, it's really not that much. So go like 1 inch by, you know, about a 1/2 inch on either side larger, and then bada boom, bada bing, you're going to be able to just slap that thing together, and you're not going to have to worry. It's not going to be a big, you know, thing for you. Okay, so I'm going to go head over to the sewing machine and get started. So why don't you come with me? Okay, I'm going to try this different angle this time, you guys, and we're going to see how it goes. Okay, so here's my first piece, and I have to look at in very serious light because I can't ever tell. Okay, so this is the right side up. Yay! There's some lovely texture in that you could totally see that raises in the light, so I love that. And that's going to go over number 1 right here, and I'm hoping that that this is going to work out. I started noticing, or I definitely noticed once I was doing all of my editing in the first video, that I was cutting off a lot of what I was doing at the top. So it's a work in progress, guys. Whenever you have to do everything yourself, it can be very difficult. Okay, so I'm going to cut a piece for number 2. And it's, you know, it's kind of a small piece, but just like with this guy, you know, I mean, y'all, that is not a big piece of fabric. I mean, I know it's a lot bigger than the piece that's going to go right there, but really, I mean, don't try to cut your piece that small. That's why you're aggravated. That's why you're aggravated. It's going to make your life so much more difficult cut yourself a decent size piece, okay? And then I'm going to do the same thing for the piece that I'm going to be adding on, because if you cut it too small, honestly, you're just going to annoy yourself. So I just cut myself a big old piece, right? I'm ready to go now. So I'm going to take this, and I know that this is right side up. For the very first piece, and only the very first piece, you want the fabric pretty side away from you. And then you're going to put that to the back of the template, and you're going to hold it over number 1, which you don't have to fight with it, because number 1 is really small. Your piece of fabric, not much bigger, but a whole lot bigger than where it needs to be. So you don't have to fight with it, okay? Now, you're going to take number 2, you're going to turn it toward the top, and I'm hoping y'all can see that. I'm sitting there and I'm trying to, I'm going to get this, guys. I'm going to get this, I'm telling you. I don't know if I need to like move a Hollywood light behind me or what I need to do, but I will work this out. So now you're going to take your fabric for number 2, you're going to hold it pretty side toward you, and you're going to put it to the back of the template. And you want the top of the fabric to be at least 1/8 of an inch above. And honestly, like, you can just go to town, because your piece of fabric is big enough that you know you're going to cover everything, right? So there is no worries here. I'm great. The piece is going to be exactly where it needs to be. No worries. So I'm just going to sew that line between number 1 and number 2. I have set my stitch length to 1.2. I'm going to use my hand crank. I never know what to call this thing. I'm going to use my hand crank, and I'm going to lower the needle down till I see it's right at that point where it needs to be. Then I'm going to lower my needle, lower my foot, and I'm just going to sew that across. And your stitch is so small that you do not need to do a back stitch. Now, if your machine automatically does it, it's okay. It's nothing wrong with it. I'm just telling you that you really don't have to. If you want to do it, just because you're like, oh, I just have to do it, it's okay. You can do it. I'm just saying you don't need to, because your stitch is so darn small that it's not going to come out. And I'm just going to, since I did one there, I'm going to make one more stitch, because I'd rather go over than not go far enough. And there we go. So now I'm just going to clean this up. And let's head on back to the cutting table. Okay, so number 2 is the fabric that I just added on, and I want the number 2 to be on the right side of the line that I just sewed, and that's because I'm right-handed, so I'm going to be cutting with my right hand. That line that I just sewed on, you're going to fold your paper back right there. And then, I was like, where'd my add an eighth go? You're going to take your add an eighth ruler. You'll lay it right down there and trim. And then you're going to take it, go over to your iron, and you're going to press this back. And we are ready to add our piece number 3. Okay, since I just mentioned the iron, I wanted to also say that when you are pressing anything that is foundation paper pieced, don't use steam. You're going to end up warping your paper, and it's not pretty sight. Now, personally, I don't ever press anything with steam. I tend to use what I lovingly call magic juice, and it is made by Acorn, and it's this lovely, I don't even know what's in it. It's not technically a starch, but if you can see it, I mean, my seam lays so flat, and it's just amazeballs. I sell it in my shop. Stephanie sells it in her shop. So you should be able to find it. It is a Canadian product, and it's amazeballs. Okay, so now that I've said that little PSA, I'm going to take number 3 and I'm going to turn it to the top. And I'm going to, okay, that was Jelly Bean running into the camera. I hope that didn't freak all of y'all out. Now I'm going to just cut a little piece. And that's going to more than suffice, right? So now I'm going to be sewing this line between number 1 and 2 and number 3. So it's this line right here. I'm going to take my fabric, pretty side to me. I'm going to put it to the back of the template and I'm going to hold it in place, and it is definitely at least 1/8 of an inch above the line that I'm going to sew on, and there's definitely plenty of fabric on either side. So now let's go ahead and sew that seam. When you're still at the beginning, I would sew really slow because you don't want to overshoot the mark, and it's a very small line. So just, you know, take your time. It's supposed to be an enjoyable thing anyway. So now I'm going to head over to the cutting mat and we're going to continue this. Okay, so number 3 is what I just added on. So I'm going to turn that to the right of the line I just sewed. So I want number 3 to be to the right side of the line I just sewed. I'm going to fold that back right on that line. I'm going to take my add 1/8 and I'm going to trim. And then I'm going to go and press that seam like so. Okay, so I've done my pressing. And now I'm going to be adding number 4, which I'm going to put to the top. And I'm going to cut myself a piece of fabric. All right. I'm going to take the fabric pretty side to me. I'm going to move it to the back of the template. And I want to have the top of the fabric at least 1/8 of an inch above the line I'm going to sew. And it is. And there's plenty on either side. So yay! And here we go. Okay, so number 4 is what I just added. So I'm going to turn number 4 so it is to the right of the line that I just sewed for the seam allowance. I'm going to fold the paper back. And I'm going to trim. And then I'm going to go and press that. Now remember that we do have a very set pattern of how we do it. It's very methodical. We want to sew, trim, press. Sew, trim, press. Let's go over, press this, and I'll meet you back at the sewing machine. Okay, so here we go. This is, sorry, oh my goodness, I have a frog in my throat. Okay, so this is our first round of the colors, and you can see that little bitty white in the middle. I'm so excited. Okay, so now we've done 1, 2, 3, 4, and now we're on number 5. I'm going to cut myself a piece of fabric. I'll take my piece of fabric pretty side towards me. I'm going to turn number 5 to the top, and then I'm going to move this piece of fabric to the back of the template. And like I said, I hold this up to Hollywood light, and I could totally see that. Sorry, y'all aren't going to be able to see while I'm holding it up to the light, but I can see that I am definitely at least 1/8 of an inch above the line that I'm going to sew, which is right here. So let's do that. Okay, I just added number 5. So I'm going to turn it a little bit so that it's just to the right side of the line I just sewed for my seam allowance. I'm going to use my add an 1/8 ruler and I'm going to trim. And now I'm going to go press. Okay, so I have sewed that piece on and pressed it. Now we are ready to add number 6. So I'm going to turn that to the top. I'm going to cut myself a piece of fabric. Hold the fabric pretty side to me. Move it to the back of the template. And you want to make sure it's at least 1/8 of an inch above the line that you're going to sew between number 3 and number 6. Let's see. Okay. And that's the line there. Here we go. Okay, we just sewed number 6, so I'm going to turn that to the right. Number 6 is now to the right of the line that we just sewed for our seam allowance. I'm going to fold the paper back, lay down my add an 1/8 ruler, and trim. Okay, I'm going to go and press that back. Okay, so here we are. Adding number 7, that is now turned to the top. I'm going to cut a piece of fabric. I'm going to take the fabric pretty side toward me. I'm going to move it to the back of the template. I'm going to use a light source to make sure that it's at least 1/8 of an inch above the line that we're going to sew our seam allowance on. And it is. Here we go. Okay, so we just sewed number 7 on. Going to flip number 7 so it is to the right side of the line we just sewed for our seam allowance. Going to fold the paper back on that line. Lay down my add an 1/8 and trim. All right, so I'm going to go and press this and come right back. Okay, so at this point, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to stop filming and just kind of get all of these pieces added on until I get to the part where those of you who are going to be making the 4.5 inch unfinished block will stop. Okay, so when I get to that point, I will come back and discuss what you do after that. And then I will continue to do my own block and come back and show you my finished product. Okay, so I have gotten my my block to the point where if you are making the 4-inch block, 4.5 inch unfinished, then this is where you would stop, okay? And you can see that where the thicker black dotted line is, right, that is the outside of your triangle. And you're going to have, so you would go 1/4 inch past that for your seam allowance. Okay, but we're not worrying about that right now. You're going to have finished up and pressed the last piece on the right side of your template. And then what you're going to do is right here, this is now going to become your last sew line. Okay, you're going to attach piece A, which will be whatever your background fabric is. And after you, you're going to sew, you're going to trim, and you're going to press. And then you're going to add on B. So you have A, B, and C. Okay. And then after you add B, and you're going to sew it on this darker double line, dotted line. It's a long day, guys. It's like 10 p.m. now. And so you're going to, that's your last sew line, right? So you're going to attach that there. You're going to sew, trim, and press. And then you're going to attach C, and you're going to sew this seam allowance line right there. Okay? After you sew it, you're going to trim, and then you're going to press. And then after you have all 3 of your background pieces on, then you are going to trim off your block with this outside dotted line being your seam allowance, your final seam allowance. So you will trim on that outside lighter dotted line. Okay, and I can't show it to you now because I'm doing the whole block. So I'm going to continue sewing, and like I said, I will come back and show you my final block. But right now, I think I'm going to go put my pajamas on, and I have made myself a cup of coffee, and then I'm going to keep sewing. And when you see me come back with my block, you probably won't see me in person because, like I said, I'm going to be in my pajamas. So I will be back with my finished block, and you'll be able to see how it finishes up.